And kids,
Kindergarten and under, dismissed.
you may be seated. Reach over and hug your mom if she's sitting next to you. We miss all our moms who are not here because they went to be with their kids somewhere else. We're glad for all of you moms who are here, and some of you, your kids came with you to be with you here. It's a fair trade-off. Some go, some come. Thank you very much for being here today, and God bless you. If your mom's still alive and is with you, thank God for that, and cherish all the good memories you've made. If your mom's already passed on, thank God you had a good mom who is mostly responsible for why you're probably in church today and keeping your nose clean and your life right. God bless our moms. Been a busy week for a couple of our families. Diane Seals had a retina that had detached, repaired this week. She's isolated for about 7 days for risk of infection. So say a prayer for Diane Seals. Rick Tomlinson had the scare one day. He's pretty much getting his house in order because he has leukemia, the bad kind. And then MD Anderson, a couple of days later, gets the good news that it's not the bad kind. It's some kind of blood disorder, but it's not the bad kind. So he's probably at this point wishing he hadn't told Amy everything he told her after he got the bad news a couple of days earlier. That's not true. One good thing I did get out of Rick's terrible experience this week is that he is sort of living justification now for me not worrying about jogging or riding bicycles or trying to stay healthy. I'm just going to eat Blue Bell and continue to do exactly what I do, because apparently you can be in perfect health and keep your belly flat and get bad news from a doctor. So let that encourage all of you other fatties. Just continue doing what you're doing. Don't worry about jogging. Rick, it is a delight to have gotten good news after the news that you got first. It was kind of a shocker to everybody in church when we got the word that Rick had something like acute myoblastic leukemia, whatever. I probably said all that wrong, but y'all know what we're talking about. Happy Mother's Day to you. I'm not going to keep you long today. Famous last words. There's a big clock up there. I'm going to let you out early. Not because it's Mother's Day and you want to beat the Baptist to the cafeterias, but because when Leo and Brian were heading out with the children, I did see a couple of rolls of duct tape in one of their hands. If you want to go check on your children, feel free to go check at any moment. I'm pretty sure that duct tape was for a craft of some kind. I don't think they would dare use them on your little angels. I want to just talk to and about moms briefly today. It is Mother's Day. It's a day, thankfully, that I know we're always grateful for our moms, but you know the advantage of having a day set aside like we do holidays in America is that it gives you a day to actually focus your thoughts and attention in that area instead of just, passing on. So let me say to all of you mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers here, on behalf of your children who have already thanked you today, let me say thank you for just being who you are and what you are, for being what all moms are. There's something so unique about motherhood that you just don't look around and say, that's a bad mom, that's a good mom. We know moms are different. Some are like totally different than others. But moms are so uniquely devoted to their offspring that there are even scriptures that say, would a mother abandon her young? As if that's outrageously impossible. And so thank you. Thank you for being what you were. Thank you for remaining what you are. I sat down this week and I thought about my mom, knowing Mother's Day was coming. And I thought, I'm going to jot down a few of the things my mom lived by and raised us by, and a few of the things that she said, the rules that we grew up with. And I thought in my brain, I'll write down about 3 of the things Mom said, and I'll just pass them on to you for what they're worth. And when I started writing things down, I wrote down 5 right off the bat, and then I wrote down 8, and then I wrote down 12, and I finally stopped at 16. So I'm going to be brief today. we have 16 things. That means if I spend 2 minutes on each one, you'll only be here for 32 minutes. And I know right now some of your brains are already saying, then get to it, get to it. Get on, hurry. Get to number one. No, I have to set it up first. That'll take 30 minutes. Genesis 17th chapter, when we were talking about Abraham, when God was addressing Abraham and getting him ready for the future and the plans that God had for redemption, it was said of his wife, she'll be the mother of nations. I bet there's not a mother in this room who one day when you had your first child thought, I'm going to be the mother of many, many more. In fact, during childbirth, you probably thought, this is the last. There will never be another. And if the man wants one, he will have to find it somewhere else. And some of you lived up to that. Others of you decided to try it one more time. And then clearly some of us quit after the second one. An Everyday Life article estimates the number of descendants, the average number of descendants of whoever the mother was in your history 100 years ago. An Everyday Life article estimates that her offspring would probably number 450 people 100 years ago. If you count, if she had what was back then an average of, I think it was 5 children. If she had that average of 5 children, they estimate 100 people who have descended from her. I don't know how many descendants you'll have in 100 years, because nowadays we don't quite have as many children as they did 100 years ago. But at any rate, in fact, that article in Everyday Life goes on to extend and says still, even at today's numbers, the average woman today, 100 years from now, will be able to count just over 400 people in her descendancy. If you lived your life, moms, grandmoms, in such a way that you thought your influence would reach all of them, how blessed and fortunate would our nation be, and in fact our world. And in some ways, the scripture is actually not just about Abraham's wife when it speaks of giving birth to a nation. In some ways, we can truthfully say every person in America has a mother somewhere in his legacy who has influenced him. I realize that the current state of politics in America doesn't look good for our mothers. Some of you apparently haven't done a really good job. Or the politics in our, I'm looking at the camera, not you, or the politics in our nation would be a little better. So now we know who to blame. It's not the Republicans or Democrats, it's the mothers who gave birth to them and influenced them. I started thinking of my mom, and I really was. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write down about 3 or 4 things my mom made us live by, and I'm just going to pass them on to you, and we'll get out of here. Because we did have rules in my household. And I was going to call it rules for kid building. And then I thought, well, what if we're building a nation? You moms are building something bigger than just a kid. That kid that you're building right now, that kid's going to be a husband or a wife. And then that kid's going to be a grandfather or a grandmother. And then that kid is going to be a worker, a laborer of some kind, and going to influence a lot of other people in his. And you're the one developing and building that empire, that nation, that legacy, that city, that population that's going to come from that place. There was a verse, I don't know where I put it. Did I put it next? Yeah, Proverbs 29:15. Because it's on yours, not mine. There's a verse that says, a rod of reproof gives wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. Didn't say his father. It's almost like, well, we're just going to count the dad out. He's probably not going to be there a lot anyway. But mom is. And so if a child is left to himself, he'll shame his mother. It's interesting. You look that up, and it literally, they could have literally translated, King James scholars could literally have translated it, a child abandoned by its mother, because the word, the phrase, left to himself, is actually only one Hebrew word. And so it is translated quite often abandoned. The King James scholars, however, when they were laboring on that particular verse could not imagine that the author meant a mother abandoned her child, because mothers did not abandon them, neither in the time the scripture was written nor in the time of King James scholars doing the translating. And so they did a thorough study of the use of that word, which I cannot pronounce, and they came to understand that its definition didn't so much mean a mother who abandons her son as it would mean a mother or her child, daughter, as much as it means a mother who neglected the forming, the shaping. In other words, abandoning your child doesn't mean you moved to Fort Worth and don't tell them where you moved. And I know that's been a temptation at a few points for some of us. But the use of abandon in this verse means a mother who doesn't try anymore, who gives up, who abandons the rules. Believe it or not, and I know you believe this, we little humans need rules and regulations. We're not unlike puppies. Puppies, they need rules and regulations, but they do. And human puppies, babies, don't know they need it, but they do. And a child raised with no parameters, a child raised with no rules, a child who doesn't hear the word no, a child who doesn't ever get the rod and reproof. Don't let America brainwash you into being an idiot. American politics is idiotic. I don't care who says, I don't care if anybody likes that or not. Political correctness and the idiocy of America is just outrageous. And more outrageous than that is now if you want money from America and you're a third world nation, you have to sign a United Nations agreement to honor all of our human rights initiatives. So you can't even get the money America used to give unless you agree with America's position on abortion and abortion clinics and homosexuality, same-sex marriage. And one day, believe it or not, it'll be that spanking a child is abusive. By show of hands, how many of you people in here were spanked by a parent when you were young? Look how sorry and rotten and pitiful you people. Look around at all hands. No wonder you people are so warped and bent out of shape and crazy and worthless in society. Isn't that silly? And we're letting a handful of politicians tell us exactly how worthless we parents are, and that village really needs to raise a child, not you. And the government's a better job of what your kids need than you are. And oh, my Lord. So I'm just going to pass on to you. Sorry for the number, 16 rules that my mom made us live under. And for what it's worth, I think they were pretty good. You're welcome to them if you want. Number one, and I divided them in 4 categories just for brevity's sake. The house rules, most mothers probably are going to have, you're probably going to be able to walk down this list and say, well, my mom did. Number one was obey. You just had to obey. I see little kids in the stores talking back to their mamas and daddies, and I'm like, is this a candid camera moment? Because you don't talk back to your mommy and daddy and call them a name in a store. Do you really? And that woman is still standing there saying, now, honey. That didn't happen in my world. In my world, if mama said stop, you stopped. I like that video they played a while ago. Boy, when my mama said it right, you did it. It didn't matter that mama wasn't quite as strong as I was when I got a little older, and she thought that spanking me with a dress belt made, cloth dress belt. You know what I'm talking about? That kind you ladies wear, not made out of cowhide with buckles that, would... You know what I'm talking about, a dress belt. I got a couple of spankings with dress belts. First time I laughed. I learned to pretend that it hurt badly. And so after the first one, when I laughed, because that's all you got, I said, and she had more. And so the next time she pulled a dress belt out, I really did hurt. I mean, I acted, oh my God, please stop, stop. And as soon as she quit and went out of the room, I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. I pray for whippings from my mama, not from my daddy. You know why I got whippings? I never really did anything except disobey them. But that was enough. You just obey. If they say don't, they have a good reason for saying don't. They shouldn't have to explain it to you 15,000 times why eating a whole tub of ice cream is bad for you. I say don't, I don't. One of the stupidest things I ever did, I don't know what it was in my little brain. Bacon in the package when you get it at the store looks good. When you look at that red meat on it, doesn't that look chewy to you? I mean, it just looks good. And we went to the grocery store one time, and I lied like I often did, because I'm sitting in the back seat with a few sacks of groceries, and I'm looking at a pack of bacon sitting right there on top with that nice little red, thin meat in there. And I said, Johnny gets to eat bacon out of the package. And my mother said, no, he doesn't. Never turned around. They know what a little knucklehead's in the back seat. They don't have to look and actually have a conversation with stupidity. And so my mom just said, no, he doesn't. And I said, yes, he does. His mom and dad let him eat bacon right out of the package. It's bad for you. It has to be cooked. That's silly. Well, silly or not, his parents let him eat it because I wanted a piece of that bacon so bad. It looked so good sitting right there in the sack next to me in the back seat of the car. And I thought, how can anything look? That's got to be good. And so I made one more commentary about how Johnny's parents, only his Lester's parents do. And my mom never even turned around and said, well, if you want one, open it and eat it. I had permission from the queen of the house. You don't turn down permission. So I reached over and grabbed the corners of that plastic, and I worked it till I pulled it apart. And then I didn't know it all stuck together in there, so I had to pull it wider and peel it. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a mess. And I had no idea how horrible, fat, and raw bacon meat. And I wanted to vomit. And from the front seat, without turning around, comes this sweet woman's voice. Don't spit any of it out. Chew it up and swallow it. How did she know? How could she know that right behind her, I was looking for a place to put it in the car? So I had to chew up and swallow the first bite. And you would say, you could have got some kind of trichinosis or something. What a bad mother. Hey, I never told her any stupid lies after that about eating raw food. That pretty much was back to obey it. Whatever you say, Mom. If you say don't, I won't. Because moms know. Number two, this is just a rule in our house. You treat your family with honor and dignity. You treat your sisters, I don't care how bratty they are. You don't abuse your sisters. You don't abuse your brother. You treat your family members with honor and dignity. You don't shame them. You don't embarrass them at school when you go to the same school. We did a time or two, and that's how we found out what the rules were. No, you don't shame them at church. We were raised to treat each other in our family with dignity and honor, and our parents as well. The good side of that is that's the way they treated us. My mother never embarrassed me in front of anybody, never shamed me in front of my friends or in adults or anybody else. We learned dignity, we learned honor and kindness, and we learned it firsthand. And we had to have manners. I don't know if do parents don't take this the wrong way, but do parents teach manners anymore? You understand what I'm saying? Manners, eating, sitting up straight. My mother in the nursing home after my mother finally got Alzheimer's and wasn't bad, but she was losing it. She couldn't drive. It was bad. And my mother would we'd be sitting there visiting, and somebody would walk through in the nursing home. They might be 99 years old. But my mother would nudge me and say, look at the posture. Remember, son, always stand up straight. She wouldn't criticize. She didn't make fun of them. It was just a teaching point. She did that with me when I was this tall, and we'd be at the store, and she'd nudge me and say, you see how that looks when people stoop? Hold your shoulders up, son. Always stand up. We'd sit at the table, and I'd want to sit down and grab some dinner, and sometimes I might not have shoes and socks on. I want to put a foot up in the chair and pick a toenail. You better not. You better not touch your feet in this house. You sit up straight. How many of you kids have ever been told that proper dining etiquette, you lay your left hand in your lap? Have y'all ever been told that? No, I'm not talking about you older folks. I know you older folks. How many of you kids have ever been told proper dining, your hand lays in your left lap? Your left hand lays in your lap. Anybody ever been told that? Oh my Lord, what's wrong with you mothers? We were poor. We were pitifully poor. But boy, when you're eating at somebody else's house or you're out to eat, my mother said, you put that left hand in your lap, son. You eat with that right hand. You don't hold bread and push food against it and sop it up. You don't take bread and sop up the gravy. And if you do sop it up, you do it with your right hand. Lay your fork down and do it with your right hand. How many of you older folks were taught that? Any older folks taught that? Hold them up high so the young ones can see. See, so you know it's not my mother was crazy. That's proper dining. Once in a while, Sandy and I were at a restaurant here a while back, and it was, I think, Luby's. Didn't we go to Luby's last year sometime? And I kicked her under the table, and I said, look at that. There was an old couple sitting there, old couple meaning my age. Only when you get our age, everybody else is older than you, even if they're not. So there was an old couple sitting there, and I kicked her leg under the table, and I said, look at that. Man and woman we don't go to fancy restaurants. I think it was Luby's. And they're sitting there, and their shoulders are up, and their left arm is in their lap, and they're eating dinner in Luby's with the right hand and the left hand laying in their lap on their napkin. Pretty cool. I wish I'd paid attention to Mom. I don't care about not using my left hand. I get food faster in if I use both hands. But I didn't when I was a boy. And Mom was always, hold your shoulders up, stand up tall, stand up straight. As long as you can, stand up straight. And I get out of bed now in the mornings at 67 years old, and the bones don't work right, and it's just so much easier to walk like this. I mean, just really, to climb stairs sometimes. Y'all know that get along we're talking about. It's not. We're not unaware. We know it's there. It's that we're actually rocking with the pain, and it's easier. It's easier to walk this way and climb stairs if you're just kind of rocking with the pain. And I can't climb stairs or do that without hearing my mother's voice in my brain. Hold your shoulders up. As long as you can stand it, just walk straight. Keep your posture. And it wasn't like, a religious thing. It's just, that was what moms did. They tried to train us to be well-rounded humans, not to just be kids living off their payroll until we don't know what to do anymore because Mom and Dad wanting to kick us out, and we're only 30, 35. Why do I have to leave? Why can't me and my new wife move in with you and my girlfriend or boyfriend? Well, in these days, some of them can. Not in my day. Not my mama. Not our house. And, by the way, if you live here, you work here. One of the funniest things that the cops didn't believe me one time when I hit a boy in my car when I was 16 years old. I was driving down the street in the neighborhood, and a little 2-year-old boy was hiding behind the tailgate of a pickup on the bumper, playing games with his friends. I saw kids up in the yard, so I was barely driving. I probably wasn't doing 20 miles an hour. and just as I got there, this little kid jumped off that bumper, hiding behind that tailgate right in front of my car. My 61 Chevy Impala had a little beak on the hood, and I saw that beak hit this child in the neck, his head snap over and then drop out of sight, and I'm just standing up on my brakes. Because dump trucks went down there building new houses, I skidded 80 feet. My skid marks were 80 feet. When the highway patrol came out, I took the kid to the hospital with his daddy. Daddy threatened to kill me on the street. Neighbors were screaming. Mama was going ballistic. We were too far for an ambulance, not too far, but a long way, and I just said to the dad, if you'll pick the boy up and put him in the car, I'll drive him. And he trusted me, and we drove with me 16 all the way to the hospital in Mesquite. The family had called before cell phones. The family had called and told them we were coming. They were ready for us when we got there. And so it was scary. I prayed all the way for God to out loud in front of the man, I prayed, God, let this boy be all right. And so they took care of the boy. The cops came, picked me up, went back out. They'd measured the 80-something foot skid marks. They knew I was driving 40. One of the cops, fortunately, just tested it himself and drove down that street at 25, locked his brakes up, skid 88 feet. So they knew it was the sand that made it slide. Cop is interrogating me about my habits. What was I doing? Why was I going that way? And I said, I was going to do the family laundry. I had all the family clothes in the back seat. And the cop, yeah, well, where were you really going? I was going to the laundromat. I had the quarters. We didn't have washing machines in the house and dryer. It was my job to go wash the laundry. I took all the clothes to the laundromat, and I washed them in the coin-operated laundry, and then I folded them up and put them in bags and took them back to the house because I live there. I work there. Y'all do that, don't you? Oh, you got a laundry in the house. Well, that way your 16-year-old doesn't have to drive to the laundromat. They can do laundry right there in your house, can't they? I realize we've only got through 4 and we've already stirred up controversy. It's gonna be hard. Don't try to change it now with them little buggers you're raising. Oh, Lord, no, they'll mutiny now. They're not used to thinking that they have any obligations and responsibilities in that house. God knows we don't want our little darlings to have to work. And don't worry about it. They won't be working when they're 35 either, because they're clearly not going just to the TV people. That's all I'm talking. Everybody here, our children work in the house. You people watching on the internet. Character rules in my house. Number 5, speak well about people and to people. I can honestly tell you, I've often said my dad. I've never heard my dad in his life before we buried my dad. Never heard him ever say a negative word about any one human being. And I always say that, and that is a truth. But, you know, on retrospect, I don't think I recall my mother ever saying anything either. It just wasn't what we did. I singled my dad out because it was a stated philosophy of my dad. My dad would say it. Don't speak badly about people. Don't gossip. Don't run them down. Don't slander. If you can't say something good about people, don't say it. So my dad verbalized it. But because my dad verbalized it, I give him credit for it. Truth is, I never heard my mother criticize anybody either, and we weren't allowed to. I made one mistake one time when I was about 10. We were driving close to downtown Dallas, and there was some poor beggar who was physically harmed in some way. I don't remember what his affliction was, but he was limited physically, and he was begging on a corner, and I'm like 10 years old in the back seat, and I make some wisecrack about that man on the corner. And my father got through the red light and slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the curb and turned around and looked at me with his hand in that backhand posture, which he never used, but he threatened to a lot. Boy, yes, sir, don't you ever make fun of anybody for any reason. Don't you make fun of anybody who's limited and can't do what you can do in any way whatsoever. The lesson was very clear. My mom reinforced it. My dad reinforced it. We grew up with it. If there's somebody limited and you can do more than they can do, then God put you on this earth so you can do it for them. You don't mock them and make fun of them. You help them. It's just that simple. And we didn't have this thing about honesty is the best policy. Honesty was the only policy. I stole a Coke. I shoplifted when I was 12 years old, first and last time. 2 of my buddies wanted to shoplift a Coke out of a little store. I was 12. They were only 7 cents. I didn't need it. I didn't need the Coke. And I probably had 7 cents in my pocket. But it was just the idea. It was so cool. Richard laid the plan out. Lester said, oh, okay, if you want to. They looked at me. I didn't want to be the stick in the mud and not do what they were doing. So we went in and took turns distracting the clerk and putting the Coke in our jackets. It was wintertime in Dallas. we sneaked out with our stolen goods and went around the corner, and we thought, it was, oh man, that's so cool. Look at us. But my conscience beat me to death so badly that I privately said to God, I'll never do anything like that again, because I'd been raised by a mother better than that. Don't take what's not yours. Be honest about life. That's not honesty. That's stealing. Stealing is dishonest. Don't ever do that. And I spent my next few years wishing I hadn't done it and not even knowing there's no way to undo what you've done when you've done it. And that's why we live with guilt and shame sometimes. And when I got to Vietnam, I kind of thought it might be possible that God would bargain with me, just in case God's a bargaining God and I want to survive Vietnam and get back home. Hey, God, what if I promise to fix a couple of things I messed up? I'll tell you one thing, you know, God, if you get me home from Vietnam, I'll go back and make up for that stolen Coke. And I really prayed that. Not quite as naively as I'm telling you, but I did pray it. And then I got home after 13 months of Vietnam, and I got home. I didn't have a car. I had to borrow the family car, and my mom and dad worried about me because I was a little psycho and crazy and trying to adjust back to the rules of, you know, America and at home. And I said, I need to borrow the family car one day. I need to go get me a car. I got to run some errands. I drove all the way back into Dallas, back in the little ghetto burb we lived in, pulled into that little store. And I walked in, and Cokes back then were 10 cents for the Coke and 3 cents for the glass bottle. And I walked in, and this old woman sitting back there wearing Coke bottles for glasses said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Are you the same woman owned this store about 6 years ago?" She said, "Yeah, my husband and I owned this for years and years. He passed away, but yeah, this is our store." And so I walked over calmly and confidently, and I laid a dime and 3 pennies on the counter, and I shoved it toward her. She said, "What's that?" And I said, "When I was 12 years old, I came in this store and I stole a Coke. Me and my 2 buddies stole a Coke. I'm not paying for theirs. That's up to them and their conscience. But I'm paying for mine." And she looked at me, looked back and up and down, and pulled a stool over and sat down on it and shook her head, looked up again. She said, "Well, this is a first for me, and that's okay. I'm just glad you came in and slid that money back." I thought, no. That 13 cents right there, that's buying so much relief off me. I have hurt because of that theft since I was 12. My mama raised me better than that. And it's nagged me forever. I want to get rid of the nagging. So she looked at it again and she said, "Well, you know, they were only a nickel and 2 cents for the bottle back in those days. I owe you some change." And she actually opened the register to get me change. And I stopped her and I said, "Hey, it's 13 cents. It's interest. It's well worth it." It gets it off my chest. And the old lady broke down and started crying. She came around the counter and said, "I got to hug you." And she came around, and then I started crying. And she said, we knew all the little boys that stole from us in here. We were never naive about it, but we made up our minds we're not going to get them in trouble. We're not going to call the police. We're not going to catch them and call their parents. We just wrote the losses off, and we knew when we were stolen from and when we weren't. I probably knew the day you boys got your Cokes. But you're the first one. You're the first one that's ever come back in here and paid for anything that was stolen. And I don't even know what to say. And she just buried her head in my chest and cried. And then I cried a little bit with her. And man, I walked out of that store. I felt so good and clean and light. And then I thought, now I can tell my mom that I stole a Coke when I was 12. I couldn't have told her that story until I made it right. And so when they came in from work that day, I said, "I got to tell you where I've been today." And I told my mom that I had fixed that old theft when I was 12. And my mom just cried for a minute and then walked over and patted me on the back and told me that's why I was always her favorite son, in case my brother and my sister might catch this on the internet. Don't take it if it isn't yours. Goes with the stolen Coke. Rudeness and vulgarity. Small man's imitation of strength. Boy, when I come home and want to say a word I heard boys at school say, "Whoo!" My daddy would turn around and say, "What'd you say?" Shoot? No? I'm pretty sure I know what that sounds like. "What'd you say?" I didn't want to say it. Isn't it amazing how it's okay to just say it when you're just sticking there because your buddy, "Hey, you blankety blank." And then your daddy says, say it to me right now. Just say it. Well, I don't want to. Well, say it. Well, can I just spell it? No, you say it. You just say it. My mom come around the corner and said, what are y'all talking about? Well, Daddy boy here, let him tell you. Tell your mama that word, son. I don't want to tell my mama that word because right now I feel like that word. And I don't want to say it if I don't have to. No, you have to. And my mom, smart enough, figured it out. She said, well, why don't you spell it? Dad looked. I told him no. I said, okay. So I spelled it for Mom. Mom said, why would you say that? Everybody says it at my school. You want to be like everybody? Oh, what does that word mean? Well, I guess it means, no, I mean literally. Well, I guess it means, I don't know, waste. How does it fit in your sentence? How does it apply? It doesn't. It's just like I don't know, it's just a swear word. Why would you say it? Why is it necessary? And my mother drilled it in me. The only reason people cuss, because they have limited vocabulary and smaller brains. If you've got a big enough vocabulary, you can express anything you need to express. And you don't have to resort to cheap vulgarity to make somebody know I mean business. Blankety blank. No, that means you're ignorant. Doesn't mean you're making business now and you're down. It just means you're stupid. You don't know how to express yourself. And you're rude, especially in a store. That's literally what we were raised and heard so many times. My mother's, one of her phrases was, rudeness is a small man's imitation of strength. It's not original. She got it from some poet because Mom loved to read. I don't know who she got it from. God rules in my house. God exists. You might as well believe in him. But whether you believe in him or not doesn't make him go away. So if he's really real and he exists, you probably ought to believe in him. They didn't try to force faith on me and make me believe I had to believe anything. They just, well, he's real, so you decide what you're going to do about it when it's time to face him. And in my home growing up, we didn't have, there was no way in the world this boy right here could ever said, I got too much homework, I can't go tonight. Mom said, well, I guess you'll fail tomorrow. You won't pass that test, but you're going to church tonight, son. And they did not try to force me to believe God like they believed in God. They just knew that boys play games. And if I can get out of going to church tonight because my conscience might bother me at church, then I'll just let my homework, I'll act like I'm in there doing it while I'm really not. I'm reading comic books and hide them under the mattress. And then come in, I'm just swamped. I've got school is so unfair. And that English teacher, oh God, I hate that. Well, you didn't say that in my house. Nope, you get in there and do it. And if you don't get it done, okay. We're going on to church now. You work on it when you get home from church. A couple of times I tricked them into letting me take it to church. And then I tried to sit in church and do homework. And then that didn't work too well. And Mom said, you know what I think? I think it's a bad example. If you take homework to church and people see you doing homework, it's like, hey, we're at church, but God's not really all that important. School's more important than God, so let's do schoolwork at church. So I think it's a bad example, even if it might not mean anything to God. It means something to me. No more homework at church. That was my mom. I'm not telling you to make these rules up. I'm just telling you that's the way we was raised. Number 11, Mom and my dad, who couldn't read, said, you read the Bible and then you live up to it. Well, I didn't know my dad couldn't read until I was probably in the 9th or 10th grade. He faked it very well. And when I was learning to read in about the first, second grade, I was reading pretty good. And my dad was so clever, he would get me to come and take the family Bible off the coffee table, sit on the couch right beside him, open that big Bible, and start reading the Bible. I didn't know he couldn't read. I thought he was checking up on my reading. Come here, Danny boy, I want to see how you're reading. And I'd start, what do you want me to read? Well, just open it up anywhere. Just tell me where you're reading. And I'd open it up to, Ezekiel. and I wouldn't be able to pronounce some of the words, and I'd point with my finger, Dad, how do you pronounce this? How do you think you pronounce it? Hezekiah. Close enough. Close enough. Hezekiah said, and I'd keep reading. And my dad loved it when we read from the Proverbs, and he loved it when we read from Matthew and John. And so I would read, and double-edged sword. A 6 and 7-year-old boy is improving his reading skill by reading the Bible. And a grown man who can't read is getting somebody to read the Bible to him free. The guy was a genius. And every time we'd finish an hour's worth of reading, he'd say, Danny boy, you're doing really, really good reading. You're really doing good. We'll do it again tomorrow night. Now, you remember when you're reading this book right here, as he set it back on the coffee table. We don't just read this book to read it. We read this book to live by it. Everything you just read in here, that's the way you and I are supposed to be living. Okay. Don't treat God like he's Santa Claus. We never were allowed to ask God for stuff. If my daddy had if they'd had a lottery in my age and my daddy would have heard me saying, oh, God, let's just win the lottery, he'd have probably made me wash my mouth out with soap. My dad never thought that church and God was a cure-all for stuff that bothers us. God was just God. And you honor God because he's just God. And you honor God even if God takes everything away from you like he did Job over there in that book of Job. The Lord was responsible for, y'all know that, don't you? You can blame it on the devil, but the devil couldn't do anything God didn't let him do. So God is the one who allowed Job to lose everything. And my daddy and mom's philosophy was, hey, if God chooses to take everything away from you, you still worship and honor God. You just don't ask God for stuff. You ask God for life, health, and that's pretty much it, your salvation. Success rules in my house. You're going to amount to something. Guess what? You get to choose what it is. So what do you want to amount to? You're going to be the best criminal in the world. You're going to go to Huntsville and be the coolest drug addict ever. Or not. You're going to amount to something. What do you want to amount to? Because you do get to choose. Number 14, lazy people fail at everything. My mom and dad did not tolerate laying in the bed on Saturday. I didn't do that. There were chores to be done. And lazy people, the Bible says the lazy man and the glutton will come to poverty. That's what the Bible says. My dad believed it. And so we didn't get to be lazy. You pay your bills, you give to your church, and then you got something left over, you're generous with it. Because their whole philosophy was stingy people never have enough. My mom and dad were poor. Do you know we helped everybody that ever came knocked on our door? And we were poor. I didn't know we was poor until I got old enough to realize how much my dad made. And we paid $30 a month for the rent on our house. And when I got my first real job out of high school as a draftsman illustrator, I was being paid more money. My salary was more than my father's after he'd been working the same company for over 30 years. And my first real job out of high school with an engineering firm as a draftsman illustrator, I was making, and I was proud. I came home and said, Dad, guess how much my contract is for? How much, son? They're going to pay me. And then I found out that's more than my dad makes, and in a way he was proud of me, and in a way he was ashamed of himself. But my dad, poor as he was, nobody ever knocked on our door that didn't leave with a basket of food, dinner, something to eat. Always kind. Our church never had a project. My dad, if he had to, I remember one time we were putting a parking lot in, and the church was asking for donations. My dad went down to a loan company and borrowed $100 just so we could contribute $100 to a parking lot. And then finally, don't ever work to be rich. Just work to provide for yourself and your family, and you'll be happy. There's so many people trying to make more money than they're making. It's never enough, is it? No matter what you're making, it's never enough. When you finally make 6 figures, that's great. And you'll celebrate for about a month. And then it's like, well, I got to make more. I got to make more. It's never enough. And my mom and dad, I never even counted dollars as far as the future and success goes. It was like, you don't work to get rich. You just work to take care of your family, provide for yourself and those you love. Be happy. Stand, please. Happy Mother's Day to all of you. I know your upbringing was probably very, very, not yours, those of you close to my age. Your upbringing was probably very, very similar to mine. We lived with rules. We lived with fairness. We lived with principle and honor. We lived with faith and faithful people. I thank God for my mom. And beyond that, I thank God for every lady in this church who's raising babies. I wish every one of you had 3 more babies than you do. I love the children in this church. I love their honesty, and I love their fun and their spunk. I love their humor. I love the messes they get into. I'm only disappointed when I see really clean Sunday school classrooms. I like it when they're doing crazy stuff. In so many ways, most of us wish we were kids again, don't we? I love teachers who know how to teach because they're moms, and they've been moms, and they know there are places you just let it go, and you clean up later. And then there are places you teach and structure, and then you still clean up. And even the lessons are generous and kind, and man, you moms, I'm going to compliment all of you for the people in this church. This is a good group of people. You are balanced and sweet and kind. And sometimes I would say you owe that to God, but truthfully, we owe that more to moms than we do to God. God's God of everybody, and there's some really lousy people out there, and He's God over them too. Moms, raise the kind of people you are right here in this. Thank you, moms. Thank you, grandmoms. Father, thank you today for the promises of your word, and thank you for the structure of life you've given us, the family structure. Man leave his mother and father and cleave unto his wife, and then they become mother and father, and they raise those children with parameters and guides, and they don't cast them off and ignore them so that they bring them shame in days to come. In this building, there's a lot of honor and dignity. There are kids here who are a genuine honor and mark of pride to their mothers. There's no shame in this building today. Thank you for the rules and regulations and the parameters all of us try to set and fail at so many things, but still in all, you're our Savior, our God. You bless our families, and you bless our moms today. In Jesus' name we pray it. And everybody say amen. Shake hands with somebody, and you moms that your kids are too old, they didn't come up. There's some CDs over here and a picture frame, maybe a little wallet. You other moms, come get a CD or something off the table.